After years of splitting the community, Ubisoft looked to return to form with the newest title in the franchise. But how good is Assassin's Creed Mirage? Well, visually, I was pleasantly surprised with Assassin's Creed Mirage. Is it the best visual game I have ever seen? No. But is it good enough? Yes. Baghdad is vibrant. It's a crowded and bustling city, and Mirage does a great job portraying that. Instead of giant cliffs to climb or massive amounts of open world, there are diverse districts with plenty of places to explore. I was worried of Baghdad being visually dull because of the colors of the map, but I have to say it's actually quite bright. The colors of the buildings, markets, and trees help contrast the sand color of the city. That being said, the presentation is not without problems. Let's talk about cutscenes. And I'm not talking about the fully cinematic cutscenes, those look amazing. I'm talking about the minor cutscenes where our characters are having conversations that don't feel natural at all. Playing through the game, I thought English was a dubbed language with how much the words feel off to the movement of the characters' mouths. The characters look robotic, primarily because the lack of mocap. Unfortunately, without the use of mocap, it's hard for the cutscenes to feel real or authentic. It's been a problem with the past few non-mocap titles, so it's to be expected. Mirage started as a DLC for Valhalla, so unfortunately there was no fixing some of these base problems. Luckily, the character designs made up for any issues there may have been with the cutscenes. The assassins' outfits are some of the best we've had in a while. I like the return to the assassin robes, but there are also some more plated options for those who prefer them as well. The talisman showing Basim's assassin rank is a cool addition, although at some points it didn't make sense, so I'll talk about that more in the story section. Even some of the other characters like Roshan have unique and well thought out designs. I also want to commend the UI of Assassin's Creed Mirage. Now sure, it may be a copy and paste from Valhalla in a lot of ways, but when I think about Valhalla and the things I dislike about the game, UI never crosses my mind. There have been some games recently with some treacherous UIs, so I'm glad Mirage chose to keep it simple. And speaking of similarities to Valhalla, the pace at which Basim runs and the running style is exactly like Ivor from Valhalla, which shouldn't be the case. The two characters couldn't be any further apart in attributes. Ivor is a brooding Viking, whereas Basim is supposed to be a cunning thief who is light on his feet. But for some reason, when Basim runs, he looks like he has bricks attached to his feet. In the promotion of Mirage, we were told that Basim is the fastest assassin, and the movement system does not show that to me. The chain assassination is the only place I really feel that comes into play, but I have more about that later on. And when you think of Assassin's Creed, especially the earlier entries, the first thing that comes to mind is the parkour. While it's definitely an improvement from the past few titles, Basim's movement still feels rigid and static. I felt myself getting stuck running between what should have been easy to connect buildings. I'm not sure if this was the controls or user error, but I found it hard to smoothly run through the city for a long time. For a nimble and fast assassin, Basim felt clunky as he traversed the buildings. Although the movement was supposed to be built off of the Unity parkour system, it's not quite as fluid and easy as the movement in Unity. Unfortunately, it's another problem with Mirage being tied to Valhalla, since they use the same engine and building it from the ground up would have taken way too many resources. But the biggest problem is the lack of freedom of movement. Ever since Origins, this has been the case, but for large open world environments, it's not as important. There's not a lot of creativity in climbing rocks or massive statues. I'll never understand why things like side or wall ejects were taken out of the games. Sure, the controls could be hard to learn, but once learned, it made moving around areas or buildings a lot easier. In Mirage, getting down from buildings was a pain, and I found myself falling just to save myself time from the struggle because I was annoyed. Not having the extra controls takes out the extra dimension that makes parkour amazing. And it sucks because Baghdad is so much better for parkour than the last 3 worlds we have gotten. The city is made to traverse, they just don't give you ways to actually do it. It's unfortunate because you spend so much time creating this awesome city made for old school parkour, then you don't add back in the mechanics that made those parkour systems great. With Mirage promoting the return to Unity parkour, I have to say I'm a bit disappointed with the result. It's not horrible, but not the step forward I expected. But with that being said, the stealth in Mirage is a massive improvement from the previous titles. And for me, that might be even more important than parkour. Although stealth and combat work together, I'm going to talk about them separately because they couldn't be more different. Basim grew up as a street thief, so by nature he uses stealth to move around the shadows without being seen. Stealth in Mirage correctly portrays that and is exactly what the game needed to get back to its roots. Dare I say it's the best stealth we've ever had? I'll have to go back and play some of the older titles to confirm that, but I'd put it up there with some of the best of them. For the first time in years, I finally feel like, wait for it, an assassin. What a crazy idea for a franchise named Assassin's Creed. And stealth is always one shot without me needing to grind levels. What a crazy concept. But in all seriousness, what really makes the stealth so great? First is the design of the map, enemy placement, and enemy logic. To make a game work for stealth, there needs to be thought into the path taken and the choices we make. Mirage does that in a few different ways. The design of each mission is correctly laid out for stealth. Instead of massive open areas, there's doors, ledges, bushes, and other places to hide to find the correct angle to approach. Each mission was a puzzle to figure out. I found myself circling the floor or learning the enemy patterns before I ever engaged. Enemies are spaced out in a way that makes you think, but also gives you an opening if used correctly. Instead of groups of 3 to 4 enemies bunched up, there was usually 1 or 2 together with more patrolling the areas. The enemies also use decent logic in noticing our character. I say decent because it's not perfect, no game is, but if one enemy detected me and I took him out swiftly, I still kept my stealth instead of alerting the base. Logically, it makes sense if one enemy noticed me, but no one was around that an enemy 500 feet away would not hear me take him out. The only reason I say it's decent is because at times I would be confused on how I was seen, but it didn't ruin my experience. Secondly, there is a focus on creativity with the stealth gameplay. The enemy strongholds have multiple ways to enter, giving the player a choice on how we approach the situation. This gives the player creativity whether we want to find a hidden key or use a group of mercenaries to cause a distraction. Depending on the choices you use, will affect the difficulty of the mission and how you complete the mission. I'll use the final mission for example. I chose not to find the master key, but in doing so, forced me to find the long way around to get inside the main building. It's a risk-reward system since the key is usually in a protected spot. You can also choose from 6 different tools that all have unique purposes. My favorites are the throwing knives and the smoke bomb. Depending on your playstyle and preferences, you can be creative with your decisions. We also see the return of true social stealth, which has been gone for some time. I know it was in Valhalla, but let's be real, it wasn't great. Blending in with crowds or sitting on a bench seats are a must for good social stealth, and it's used correctly here. I was worried about the tailing missions since sometimes it can be repetitive and boring, but in Mirage, the missions mixed with the need to use your surroundings, so it actually made them enjoyable. The only downside with the stealth is the teleporting jutsu, let's be real. I know people will have the explanation for me in the comments, and I will talk about that in the story section as it pertains more to the story or at least the lore of the game. From a gameplay and mechanic perspective, I just disagree with having it in the game the way it currently is. With a few small fixes, I think it could be better, but honestly, just gameplay wise, it's just overpowered. And I don't want to read the comments telling me just don't use the teleporting if you don't like it. It's part of getting an accurate opinion on the game. I need to use every single feature. One fix I have is making the range smaller. I felt it had a pretty far range that connected enemies that didn't really make sense for an animus glitch. The smaller range would keep the focus on a group of enemies closer together, where chaining together the attacks would just make more sense. The trajectories also make it seem more like superpowers instead of a glitch. I would have also liked for there to be specifications to use the teleport, like enemies needing their backs to be turned to Basim, or certain ledges or jumps between the assassinations When they were right next to each other, it also made sense that it could just be a quick, sped up version of what the actual assassinations were. Being able to picture myself doing the same route, but just speeding up the animations would make it easier to understand. For a game focused on stealth, I'm glad they decided to go all in and give us a real in-depth stealth system for our journey. The combat, on the other hand, is not as in-depth. Mirage took a much simpler approach to the non-stealth combat, and I for one am grateful. Gone are the numbers when you are attacking enemies. Combat focuses more on the counter-style combat similar to the early games. One improvement I like is how hard the combat is against a large number of enemies. Since Basim has no abilities to take down multiple enemies, it can get overwhelming quickly. The enemies will either attack with a red attack, which means to dodge, or a white attack, which is meant to be parried. I like the challenge, but by the time you see the color, you are already hit. You really have to learn to anticipate the attacks if you want to parry correctly. When you do parry correctly, the enemies are stunned and open for a one-hit kill, which I like. It just makes sense. We're an assassin. These basic guards shouldn't be eating up damage. The challenge of combat further encourages players to stick to stealth for most of the missions. And this makes sense, since the missions are black box missions. Black box missions are designed to have the player explore the environment to find different ways to reach and defeat the target. Instead of only having one specific way to find the target, you can use underground passages or help a merchant get his items back to cause a distraction. Instead of every mission being killing groups of enemies, they focus on a more investigative approach, finding clues along the way to help you put pieces of the puzzle together. As you would put the pieces of the puzzle together, you would find the person you need to assassinate, which you would then infiltrate where they are and take them out. Although Mirage is a linear story, Ubisoft put emphasis on freedom to approach the game however you enjoy. And that doesn't stop with the missions. After you finish the first portion of the story, you can now complete other missions in any order you like while still getting the same ending. This allowed the players more freedom in how they complete objectives, as some players are more interested in certain missions or certain story arcs. Although, I will say, it feels as if one barrel at a time is how the game was intended to be played. Outside of the main story missions, there's other side content in the world to enjoy. It's significantly less than the open world RPG games that we are used to. Inside each bureau, there are contract boards with different rewards and objectives. These can range from rescuing allies to safety or assassinating targets. Completing the contracts reward you with materials, tokens, weapons, and even a few skill points. The best part of the contracts is that they are not infinite nor randomly generated. There is only a set number of contracts to complete in the game. Why do I see this as a good thing? Well, each contract now becomes a part of the world and story. Characters and missions are all thought out for ways to develop the city more. This helps build the world out more than repeatable contracts made specifically to grind currency or some sort of XP. Another example of this are the Tales of Baghdad side quests. There are 6 more personal side missions where you interact with the normal people and assist them. My favorite by far is helping the kid learn the leap of faith. As far as I know, this is Hytham from Valhalla, the one who learns under Basim. Basim ends up becoming mentor figure to Hytham, similar to Roshan to Basim. That's what compelling side missions should do. Help give us a full image of the world we are in. Besides those missions, the other side content is mainly built around collectibles. NPCs around the map will have different collectibles you can steal, from rare artifacts to mysterious shards. Turning them in at specific places will give you rewards, from powerful gear to cosmetic items. Now you may be saying, well, that's not a lot of content. And you would be right. Assassin's Creed Mirage is streamlined compared to the previous few entries. It's a refreshing change of pace. While it still has an open world to explore, RPG elements have been almost completely taken out. There's still some RPG elements to give the player something to go for outside of the main story, but I never found it to be grindy or unnecessary. The weapons and armor are still able to be upgraded twice with materials once you find the upgrade schematics. Some of the schematics are found by playing the main story, while others are found through the open world. Materials are easy to come by, and as I unlocked the schematics, I almost always had the materials. You also earn skill points to unlock different upgrades and abilities through the skill tree. But once again, skill points are streamlined. Instead of being locked behind levels, they are unlocked by completing the main story and side missions. Basically, you still unlock upgrades and rewards, but instead of spending hours running farms for the upgrades, you play the game naturally. It also helps progression be more even across the game. To unlock the third tier of the main sword, for instance, you have to get far in the story. So by the time I have that unlocked, I should be a strong assassin. There are also tokens that you can earn by completing contracts or pickpocketing people around the city. While roaming around the city, every unlawful act you commit raises your notoriety level. As your level rises, there are more threats to be aware of, from citizens alerting guards to an elite enemy hunting Basim. It's a fun way to give us a risk-reward system, but it's not a new feature if you've been around AC games for a while. But even with all the improvements, a single-player game only goes so far without a good story. Luckily for Mirage, they delivered. Ubisoft took away the blow of the last few entries and focused on a compelling, streamlined story. So to analyze the story, I'm going to give you a summary and talk about the parts I liked and didn't like. The first part of the story is not actually shown in Mirage, which doesn't affect the gameplay, but it does pertain to the overall story. I would have liked a cutscene to catch players up on the Valhalla Last Chapter story. Basically, it's modern day Basim's blood sample is used to relive his memories. Pretty standard Assassin's Creed stuff. Our introduction in Mirage to Basim starts while he is a street thief on the streets of Anbar, living with his friend Nihal. Basim is working contracts for Dervis, helping to retrieve items for the Hidden Ones. Now this is one part that did confuse me. We later learned the Hidden Ones have hundreds of people during this time, so why do they need someone like Dervis or Basim to retrieve items for them? Is it because they are expendable? That seems to go against the creed. Once you get past that bit of confusion, Basim decides he wants to earn his way into the Hidden Ones by stealing this artifact from the Order of the Ancients. Something to keep in mind during this time is that the Hidden Ones were known to all. It wasn't until a bit later that the creed stopped being known by the general public. So someone like Basim knowing and wanting to join the creed is not as confusing as it might seem at first glance. At this point, Basim and Nihal sneak into the Caliph palace sought out by the Order of the Ancients. Nihal then kills the Caliph to save Basim before fleeing the palace. Now on the run, Basim flees the city with the help of Roshan, who takes Basim to the Hidden One's fortress, Alamut. We then follow a time jump a few years later where Basim is now training to join the Brotherhood. Instead of assuming we know what they train on or skipping it altogether, we actually get to take part in the training. It's actually cool learning the leap of faith or learning to fight with swords while a full Brotherhood is also training. I don't know what it is, but there's something about seeing the Hidden Ones thriving and not on the verge of extinction like they almost always are, it seems like. Basim is then initiated into the Hidden Ones. Their mentor, Rayhan, then learns of the Order's rapidly expanding influence in Baghdad. He decides to send a contingent of Hidden Ones to the city to investigate, led by both Basim and Roshan. This is where we finally finish the prologue and get to the meat of the story. I like the pacing of which we got to this point. Sometimes the backstories are rushed to get to the meat of the story, but setting up the protagonist is as important for a compelling story. I'll talk about the characters more in depth later, but from the first hour, I cared about Basim more than I ever did playing 90 hours of Valhalla. This is part of the story that is familiar if you have played any other Assassin's Creed game. Basim now hunts down members of the Order of the Ancients to stop their infiltration into the government. In Assassin's Creed Mirage, once you get past the first borough, you can complete the other ones in any order before finishing the story. This is a tough one for me. I like the idea of completing the missions in any order. Mirage takes a more investigative approach, so you unlock clues through the game, then it allows you to assassinate the targets in any order besides the first and last enemies. But because of that, the story feels separate without any long-lasting effects. I chose to do each borough one by one, so the story was easier to follow. I could only imagine jumping back and forth between each one and trying to still understand the story. I would have preferred an investigative lock. Once I start one borough, lock me from starting others until I complete that one, but still let me complete them in any order. Eventually, Basim confronts the Order's leader, Kahiba. Kahiba tells Basim that he is more human and to continue his search. Roshan then assassinates Kahiba before Basim can get any more answers. At this point, Basim realizes the Hidden Ones haven't been truthful to him and returns to Alamut to learn about the temple. As Basim makes his way to the temple, he saves a bunch of Hidden Ones that are now being attacked by Kahiba's troop. I think this is a really interesting part of the story. Basim felt completely betrayed by Roshan and the Hidden Ones, but still chooses to save his allies as he's still going to find out about his own selfish life. When approaching the temple, Roshan attempts to stop Basim, but Basim wins the fight, but spares her life. Basim then learns that Nihal is not real and is a representation of Loki. Basim then regains his memory and rejoins the Hidden Ones outside. Roshan then resigns in protest, and the story ends with Basim stating that he wants revenge on Odin, basically. That's where the Valhalla story picks up. I thought this part was weird. It's never explained how much Roshan or others knew about the temple. If Roshan has known Basim's whole life he is Loki, why let him get close to it and teach him to be strong? Or did Roshan know there's some power down there? And if Roshan knows he is now Loki, why not tell the whole Brotherhood, hey, this isn't Basim anymore, instead of just resigning? I know Rayhan allowed him to go into the temple, but does he actually know he's Loki now? I'm sure the Hidden Ones would want to know about this. As a whole, I felt Mirage is well written and well paced. As an Assassin's Creed game, we follow the story of a young kid who works his way to a master assassin, stopping the Order's plans along the way. I can't ask for any more than that. The story is not the best in the franchise, but it has some good moments. But there are still some questions I have unanswered about the story. Besides political power, it's never really explained what the Order is truly after. My only thought is they just wanted all of the Isu artifacts they could find and needed Basim to unlock it for him. Kahiba seemed to know who Basim truly was, or at least that he had more power, but why not go after Basim when he is younger and get him into the Order? If both the Hidden Ones and Order know who Basim is, why do they both wait so long? Why wait until he has assassinated your allies to now tell him? And how does Loki help the Order anyways? Even in Valhalla, Loki works for his own revenge, but he doesn't help the Order. Loki is not a villain necessarily, but wants revenge on Odin for his son. And this is even shown with sparing Roshan. At the time, it's Nihal that is the one that tells Basim to stop, which we later learn is Loki. So Loki's not trying to destroy everybody, he just wants to destroy Odin. But that's the biggest problem when making a game that has already an ending from a different time. Trying to fit this new narrative into an already finished story can sometimes be a struggle depending on how convoluted the story is. I think that's why Mirage focused so much on the rest of Basim's life before that, and only put a small emphasis on his transformation to Loki. A majority of Assassin's Creed Mirage can be played without ever understanding the Loki and Odin story. AC Mirage instead focuses on developing characters and fleshing out stories on how characters interact with each other. Basim is a tragic character, really. Early on, we learn of his street thief life, and we see children killed because of his actions. This is obviously a driving factor to why he wants revenge on the Order. It's kind of a parallel to Loki and Odin. Odin, as far as Loki knows, killed his son, which is why Loki wants revenge on Odin, so it's very similar. And knowing what we know about Basim's story in Valhalla and after, it makes seeing his upbringing and transition that much sadder. Basim wanted to be a hero of justice so badly, but his mind kept playing tricks on him, unfortunately leading to his downfall of sorts. We know 20 years later, Basim is still in the Order and even is a mentor of his own to Hytham, so I guess he can't be all bad. Unless, hear me out, it's all a mirage. Good one. But by the end of the game, it's no secret the Basim we played is no longer the Basim that is there. And that invokes emotion, which is something I look for in a main character. Something else I find important is the relationship between some of the other characters. I'm glad Nihal ended up being in Basim's imagination because, I'll be honest, I never really liked her as a character. I never felt she was giving Basim anything important in his journey, but now knowing Nihal was there just to mess with his mind makes way more sense. On the other hand, the relationship between Basim and Roshan is a tragic one. Although I disagree with Roshan's methods, I don't think she ever had anything but good intentions for Basim. Now, we don't know a lot about Roshan's upbringing, but we do know she thought she was going to die in Egypt and was given a second chance from the Hidden Ones. I see a parallel with Roshan and Basim. Roshan looks at Basim's journey of truth to be one that will send him somewhere no one knows. So Roshan, trying to be a good mentor, is guarding Basim from the truth, when in reality, Roshan should have been honest with him from the jump and let Basim make that decision for himself. To me, that's what makes Roshan leaving the Order even more compelling. Roshan clearly was extremely loyal to the Hidden Ones, the epitome of what assassins should be. So for her to leave the Hidden Ones over a disagreement shows how much she cares for Basim and the truth of the creed. Roshan could no longer stand by and watch Basim go down this road, going so far as leaving the one place that's been home. Now, unfortunately, because of the focus on Basim's personal journey and his and Roshan's relationship, the rest of the characters took a bit of a backseat. Primarily the villains. I'm talking about them as a whole because honestly, they were extremely shallow. Honestly, can you tell me any of the character arcs behind any of the villains? By the time we earned clues to find out who they are, we assassinated them. Sure, we know they weren't good people, but what motivated them individually? Why did they join the Order? The characters don't affect anything really, except giving us reasons to move up the chain and push the story forward. The same could be said for other side characters and assassins in the story. To me, they're not memorable, and besides pushing along with the story, I don't find they bring much to the table. All in all, Assassin's Creed Mirage did what it set out to do. The gameplay was a return to the old school style focused on parkour and assassinations. Is the parkour as good as Unity? No, but it's still enjoyable. They removed the grindy RPG mechanics that have been used in the previous titles. No longer is the need to farm for hours on end. Visually, Baghdad is great and the cinematics are awesome. With more time and more budget, could the story be better? Probably. But ultimately, if you're a fan of the series, it's a game you need to play. I went into Mirage with realistic expectations, and I will say I'm satisfied. Do I think it's the best overall game in the series? No, but Mirage is a fun time, and because of the great pacing and a short time for completion, I see myself coming back to this game a few more times. I would like to see a fully produced Basim story that takes place in the 20 years between Mirage and Valhalla, because that's a long time of him being Loki. But if this is the end for Basim's story besides modern day, then at least we have a better conclusion. Hope you guys all enjoyed the video, and if you did and you can leave a like, that really helps me out. Let me know anything down below you want to discuss. I always love talking Assassin's Creed, and until next time, I will see you guys.